We're going to go ahead and get started. I see we have a couple more that are taking their seats. Welcome. Everybody enjoyed your lunch? It's good? All right. We still got a few more coming in, so we'll give it just another minute, and then we'll get started. All right, so welcome everyone. If you don't know where you are in Raising the Bar, Golf, Galas, Finest, and more. Today we're going to be talking a lot about our themed events. And for those of you that aren't sure about what themed events are, we are actually basically bucketing everything together that is not endurance or greatest strides. So any way that you can bring a fun event to your chapter and your volunteers in a way to raise more awareness and money. So that's what we're talking about today. So we have some really great panelists up here that I'm excited to share with you. And when you leave here, we want you to be able to explain the skills that you need to have to make a sponsorship pitch. Also, how can you add some fun elements to your events and make them extra exciting? And then also, when we break out into our groups, get some ideas from other chapters as far as fun ideas that you can take back to your own groups. So my name is Brittany. I'm excited to be here from the Carolinas chapter, and I got involved with cystic fibrosis through our events. I actually had no tie to CF. I Googled what's the best charity event in Charlotte, and literally Guys and Dolls popped up. So that's how I got involved. Got involved with Guys and Dolls, found that personal connection to CF through one of the families that I met, and have been here ever since. So you don't necessarily have to have a tie to CF, but we can get you involved in a bunch of different fun ways. So as I mentioned, what are some variations of themed events? Some people do dinner dance. There are golf events, fishing events. I've seen cornhole tournaments. I mean, there's all kinds of different things you can do. And then there's also the YP or Finest events as well. So our first group that's going to talk is Mac and Mac. Can't make that up. That's their real names. And they are here with us from our Maryland chapter. And one of the cool things all right, Maryland. One of the cool things that they bring to the table is not only are they volunteering for our events and going out and asking for sponsorships, but they in turn are sponsors themselves through their businesses. So we are very excited to have them here, and they're going to talk a little bit about making the ask and sponsorship sales. So welcome, Mac and Mac.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess, we'll talk about it from a couple different angles, but I think really what we've done a nice job of over the last few years is evolving some of our events. Passion for Food and Wine has become one of our big theme events. We've turned that into, I think we net just a little over 300,000 every year through that event now. It's awesome. I think if I look back on kind of how we started the pitch, it was kind of crazy. So we essentially bring in 17 of the best chefs in Baltimore, and they cook 7 courses right in front of you, and it's paired with privately donated wine. And so when we looked at going and making that pitch the first time, it was kind of a crazy event to pitch people on, and we still weren't really sure if it was actually going to work. So we had that in the back of our mind. But I would say the best thing we did was we identified 4 or 5 really early companies that became loyal partners and have been with us ever since. And once we had those folks in, we were able to really springboard from there and talk to others that they knew. But identifying kind of those first 4 companies going into it was really key.
Interestingly, I spent a good part of last week in my business talking about diversity, and you can see how well we did today. We have 2 Macs, and we're both from Maryland. Interestingly, Mac became familiar with cystic fibrosis through our Finest program. He's young now, but he was certainly young then, and he missed his fundraising goal and got so pissed off he decided to start his own thing. And Passion for Food and Wine was his brainchild, and that's now an event that's over 300,000, he said, every year. So it's that Finest program really is a great program. It's a great feeder for us. And it's interesting because, as Mac mentioned, we both are in positions also where a ton of people approach us in the community to give money to various causes. And as you all know, there's so many great causes out there. The more I live, the more I realize just how many people are out there that just are all heart and are just doing some fabulous things. And I was reminded as we were preparing for this last week, one morning, even before I got to my chair in my office, I received 3 different solicitations for contributions. One was from somebody I sort of knew in the marketplace that was at a competitor firm of Max, and he wanted me to give him $5,000 for a golf tournament for American Cancer Society. Hard to argue with that cause. We all have folks that we know that are affected by that. I got an email from one of our young up-and-coming folks who will be a finalist this year, who wanted to see me later in the day. He had joined the junior board at the First Tee of Baltimore and wanted to know if we could help support his cause. And then I was also approached by a client of the bank's that was one of our bigger clients. And so, as you might guess, we're contributing to 2 of those 3 requests. The first one was easy to toss out given the other 2. The fact that I had one of our up-and-coming folks that not only was asking, but also was giving their time for a cause, I may have no budget left at all, but I'm going to go through the cushions and the couch and figure out how we give that guy a couple grand to support his cause for sure. And I've got a client that's paying the bills. I'll move mountains to support that. So, as I think about how I personally reacted to those 3 requests, and Mac, again, his tender age, he runs one of the larger CPA firms in the marketplace. He gets the same thing. How do we, in turn, leverage that knowledge from that side of it to how we approach the market, as we're trying to raise funds for cystic fibrosis?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, at least the themed events have really done, is it gives us a different way to approach people. And so, even if it is the golf tournament ask, right, and just thinking about how you approach people, how you look at the event. I go back to 7 years ago. What we were committed to with Passion was providing a great experience for the folks that came that night, because we knew if we could do that, they would come back again and again. And so it's certainly about that year, but if we look at a 10-year run of Passion, it's a lot more exciting about $3 million that it'll contribute than 1 year. And so doing that right from the beginning. And so I think, it comes down to having a conversation with people. And so, we've been a big proponent of that as we go into market, is trying to find out who do companies want to get in front of, what are they trying to do, what are they already involved in, because we realize we are one of the asks they might receive. And so, but I think taking care of those folks who have come and making sure that we think about the event constantly from the position of how do these people just have a fantastic time. And we have something insane now for Passion. It's like a 95% renewal every year, because it's that great.
Well, and it's because if people entertain clients and prospective clients and they had a great time and they walked away from that event branding their own companies with that event, it's very easy for that decision maker to sign the renewal at that time. And Mac's pretty good at raising the price every year too, so that tends to work out.
And we actually had a question from online, so thank you for participating. What is a finest event? So lots of different chapters approach this in different ways. You hear about Pittsburgh's event, their 50 finest. It can be a recognition program. Okay, did you just plan that to walk in the back, Justin? That's very weird. He's everywhere. But it can be approached in that way. We have something similar at the Charlotte chapter called Standout, where we recognize the top 20 or 25 young professionals in the area. And then we also have kind of like a live auction type event that doesn't have criteria to be selected. It's called Guys and Dolls. So a finest event can be really differently approached. But for us, we look to spread awareness and recognize those individuals in the community that are doing a great thing and try to bring that energy to CF. But on the flip side, you talked about the outstanding up-and-comer. When we're thinking about different businesses that we may want to get involved with, let's not go to them and necessarily ask for money. Let's go to them and say, hey, you've got this amazing individual. We want to recognize them. Oh, and by the way, you can sponsor a table if you want to at the end. So how can we make those connections with different businesses and different strong leaders in the community? So I hope that answers your question as far as what is a finest.
I'd say the other thing, and a lot of you do this as it is, but if you're calling on somebody that's a decision maker that has a connection with the cause, that's an easier ask, obviously. But for those that don't, one of the ways that our chapter has been successful, I mean, first of all, the staff that you hear that's very vocal up here in the front, they've been consistent. Turnover's been minimal, so they've been around for a while. They develop relationships with a lot of people in the marketplace. But if you're talking to a decision maker who's an entrepreneur and you ask them who they want to be in front of, because I don't know too many entrepreneurs that are looking to shrink their business. Everybody's trying to grow. If there's somebody that they haven't been in front of because they haven't been able to crack that door and we can get them in front of that person, all of a sudden they're a raving fan, and not only are they writing a check for that event, they're coming back again because they know you're going to help them. I haven't been in front of Susie Smith, and I've been trying to get in front of her for 3 years, and all of a sudden I'm a sponsor of an event, and lo and behold, I'm at the table right next to Susie Smith's company. That's pretty cool.
So, Mac, you talked about years ago at the very beginning how you had those 4 partnerships. How did you decide, looking at your community landscape, who to go after and who to make that first ask for?
Yeah, so we were converting our wine opener event at the time, and so we had some companies that had been in the mix with us, and they were kind of dabbling with their participation, and so we took the concept to them as a way to really double down on their commitment, and so we got them to, and that was really a game changer for them because, it was one of these, we all know with themed events, it's sponsorship money, and then who do you get in the room that night, right? And I think we're all thinking through that, and when we looked at this, we said, you know what? We're going to drive a premium, and with that, we know these tickets aren't going to, A, go to waste, and B, they're probably going to really think through who they're bringing, which, $10,000 a table with 10 seats, you got to like the people you're bringing that night. So it's one of those things, and it's worked out well. And so we've seen the room participation go up through whether it's bid for cure, live auction. So it was really going to them and figuring out how could they be a part of it. And I think we've done that really well. I think the other thing we've done really well, particularly with that event is, and with any event, you got to look at your committee. Our committee happens to be 17 chefs in Baltimore because we'll try and talk to everybody that night, but if you think about it, Mac's sitting at one table, I'm sitting at another. Our experience is with that chef that night, and what the staff's done an unbelievable job of, and I'll say we, but it's been them, is really building a community among the chefs that carries the life of that event throughout the year. And so I think when you think about that, and whether it's the chefs or the committees that you form for a themed event, having that coverage and really building a tight-knit operating team is key for an event to be successful. And we did that early. And we went from a wine opener event where we had 40 committee members, 10 of which were probably trying to drive stuff, right? Everybody's been on those committees before, right? So, and we went intentionally to a committee of less than 10, and it was great and really a game changer for us.
I think you make an interesting point there, talking about the cart before the horse, the fact that you had an idea and you went to those businesses and kind of pitched it to them and said, if we move forward with this, will you be on board? And for those of you that may be thinking about events that you want to start, that might be a very interesting way to approach it. Instead of having the idea first and trying to fully build it out and then get sponsors, maybe thinking about your different local businesses that you already partner with and asking them what type of event they might be interested in. I know at our chapter we had a golf event that was basically run by a business for many years because we went to them and said, how would you like to get involved? Is it a dinner dance event? Is it a golf event? And they kind of took that golf event and ran with it. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and it's great. And now we have sponsors coming and we don't really have any more tables to sell, and they're looking for new ways to participate. So they're actually trying to help us find ways to invest their dollars, which I think is really great. So if we can get to that point with all of our events, then we'll be great. But It's really been an interesting change.
And one of the things you talked about a little bit earlier was the fact that you have kept it more exclusive. And so when you have those new people coming in, you're actually growing into other events. Can you tell them a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, like any successful event, you always start to look and go, well, what if we could sell 5 more tables, 10 more tables? And what we got comfortable with Passion was when we did the numbers on the people in the room, we compared it to what we were raising per person. The worst thing we could do is start to water down that experience. And so what we did was we launched off of Passion into another event, similar concept. The idea, though, is to make it more approachable. And so we launched Feastival, which is with those same participating restaurants and some restaurants that can't get into Passion. And so now we have that event in the summer, a much lower ticket price. gets the younger crowd out that doesn't know things about CF, feeds folks into Finest, gets the continuation with the relationship with the restaurants because they're such a key part of Passion. And so we were very intentional of we could easily find a space and do that event larger. The reality is I don't think we would see the return on it at some point. And so when we looked at that, we said, you know what, let's use this as a platform to spring into something else. And so that's where Feastival came from. And Feastival's on its way. By next year, it'll be a $100,000 event. So
we'll take a couple minutes before we move on. Does anybody have any questions for Mac and Mac? No questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We are going to be breaking out a little bit later into table discussions, so they'll be out and about as well. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but if you do have a question, you'll have the opportunity to ask that. So I am super excited to introduce Pam, and she is going to be talking a little bit about one of the galas that's been very successful is it Minnesota or Minnesota? Okay.
Yeah, sure, you betcha.
I've been practicing that all afternoon for her, so she's going to talk to us a little bit about that. So welcome, Pam. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having us. And I say us because there's a couple of Minnesota chapter staff in the room. Our gala experience, my husband and I co-chairing it, began the year after our son was diagnosed. And we kind of fell into chairing the gala because there were staff changes and all kinds of things. And we just say yes to anything with cystic fibrosis. And so the year before it had been $14,000. And so we rallied friends and family and everybody we could find and filled that room, and our decorations were rose-colored helium balloons and flowers, and that was about all we did. And we raised $25,000, and we thought, yeehaw, we nearly doubled these dollars. It was an amazing success. And then we kind of regrouped after just planning that gala in 6 weeks. And we had a family that moved back into the area with a very large construction company, Mortensen. And that was the impetus to really explode this event because of the corporate connections there. So we continued to chair it, but we had these honorary chairs that really rallied around and created sponsorship. We started planning right away in January. We purposed to open the bar so that we could open the pocketbook. Talk about raising the bar in this breakout session, but it's really about opening the bar. Seems to be a theme, but that does, relax people, and they get it. They get the mission, and so that year we went from $25,000 to $220,000. So it was the beginning of the trajectory. But it didn't stop there. The next year we were $400,000. The next year we were $800,000. And we have crossed that threshold of $1 million event 2 years ago. So you can see some of the pictures there that are really fun components of our gala. We have honorees at each of our events. We have a friend of the foundation. We had a corporate friend of the foundation, and now there's been a new award. It's the medical Dr. Warren Warwick, who's a pioneer. Most of you know that name if you're connected to cystic fibrosis. And so that brings a lot of great people to the event too, to be a part of that award ceremony. We also have a great Bid for the Cure talk always. That is something that we bring to each of the events that we do, the large events. The picture on the top right there is one of our Minnesota patients who had a lung transplant at 15. And she's doing amazing. And her story was so encouraging. So it was really great to have her there and share that this is why we're doing this, so that we can have more tomorrows with those that we love. We have a great, robust silent auction. We have a committee that goes out and works with staff, and we have between 400 and 600 auction items every year, which sounds like a lot. But when you begin to tap into each of your committee members and hold accountable your board members to bring, 5 to 10 items in, it adds up pretty quickly. And then we have a fun event called the Basket Foofing Day at the office. And that's where we bring all the baskets and all the fluff and the foof, and we put things in baskets and get them assembled for the auction. And it's an event. It's a lot of fun. We really purpose to keep our committees engaged and excited about it. We meet off-site. We meet at our honorary co-chair's lake home and have a great relaxing dinner and just brainstorm and share ideas and encourage and kind of remotivate kind of mid-planning season. The center picture there with that ice sculpture, that's our signature martini luge. It's an ice sculpture. One of our finest is an ice sculpture company. And so we get that donated, we get the vodka sponsored, we get the wine sponsored. We have sponsor opportunities all over. So that's the key to growing an event is the sponsorship, because you can only auction off so many things. Our live auction is quite lively as well. We have approximately 20 items. We've gone above and beyond that, but that seems to be the good sweet spot. And one year, we were pretty intentional about soliciting our corporate friends that come to the gala, and we ask them, so what is it that you want to buy? And we go out and find that. And for many, many years, there was one of the gentlemen who wanted a puppy, and he would buy the puppy, train the puppy, and then give it to one of his employees. And so it was this continual process of finding the puppy. Who's getting the puppy this year? One year it went for $55,000.
Wow.
So we have fun. Can you imagine being in that room and watching that auction? It was amazing. We were all just astonished that this puppy went for that much. So,
Pam, earlier you talked a little bit about getting rid of the fluff and really bringing the personal touch back. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that and how you guys did that?
We just keep it personal. We share stories. We're all about cystic fibrosis, and we are intentional about having the co-chairs share their story, talk about why they're involved, talk about an update with their kids. My husband and I no longer chair the event. We've handed off the baton, and then that since it's been handed off, we definitely want to keep the personal feel. Even though it's a large event and there's lots of corporate sponsor, that's what people fall in love with. God bless you. That's what people fall in love with, is the story. And so it's really critical to make sure that you've got the story and it's told clearly. We have a sponsor who comes in and the awards are named after his daughter who's moved up. And he tells his story of his daughter Angela. And then he is a bid for the cure match. And so we've been able to give a space and a place to be able to hold those sacred spots for the story. Mm-hmm.
So earlier you talked a little bit about some of the really interesting and fun elements, and I've already made a bunch of notes on some of the things that we want to bring back to our groups, the rose wall, the pictures on the pillars. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the real interesting and fun things that you guys have done at the gala?
Yeah. Early on, we would have themed events. We had all kinds of fun themes, and we followed them through, but then we decided to pare it down. And the passion we have is for a cure. We want to get this done. And so on every pillar, on every table is a photo of a CF patient in our chapter. And that just brings it right home to this is why we're here. We're having fun. It's going to be a great night. You're going to go away with great memories and the thought that you've done something well, but those faces that you're seeing is why you're here. And we have a rose wall that we've started doing at the gala in Minneapolis. And what that is a lot of those gift cards that you get from donors that aren't really easily put into a silent auction. We just put them in envelopes and put a rose on the envelope, and it's decorated really, really well. And then people buy one at the event, and they get something for their purchase right there. There's usually one or two high-end or expensive items in there that contribute to that. We also have a high-end wine silent auction that we do, and that's $50 or higher for a bottle of wine. So we hit up a lot of our friends that are wine connoisseurs and go raid their wine cellars and set them out. And there's the option of having it corked and brought to your table, and we always have to manage that really well, don't we? Because there's been once or twice where those really expensive collective bottles have been opened, and that wasn't the plan. So.
One of the other things that you talked about was your committee. How does your committee interact with the staff? Like, where does the line draw with the staff, taking care and directing of what you guys are doing versus your committee? And how would you recommend others if they're wanting to get started forming a committee?
I would say your volunteers are your creative force, and your staff is your creative force. So it's an amazing opportunity to partner and just tap into and utilize those thoughts, those ideas. So starting in January, you kind of review what you did, boost up what you want, and let go of what didn't work so well. And then moving forward, just allowing the Gala committee to be the one to go out and make those asks, to be the one to go out and connect with the community about the Gala. And then the medallions is something that we've done historically. When Lou and I chaired it, I had a friend who had Stampin' Up, and they were closing out something, and she donated all these little porcelain medallions, and so we took them to all of the kids with CF in the chapter, and they got to decorate them and put their first name and their age on the back, and then we put ribbons on it. So at the Gala, we have volunteers that when someone has won a live auction item or has made a bid, that they go over and they place this medallion around their neck, and so that became a badge of honor for those that were participating. So just unique pieces like that to make it hit home.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. Does anybody in the room have any questions for Pam? We got one in the back.
Justin. Hi.
I just have a question. It's kind of a general question, but it's for all of you. In the honoree-based events, you have honorees that come in every year, and they may be working for a company that sponsors them for that year, or they may have personal contacts that are corporate sponsors for that year. What have you guys done in your experience to kind of retain those sponsors the year after they're no longer an honoree, and kind of, instead of, the challenge we're running into is that the honorees are kind of building these relationships for that year with the sponsors, and we're not necessarily intervening because they're sponsoring that honoree for that year, but we want to roll into a method where we're retaining those sponsors even after this person moves on and has another role in the foundation. Have you found challenges there, and what have you done in that instance?
Yeah, so just to repeat the question, he asked about sponsors specifically for the Finest event. So one of the challenges that they're facing, and we're actually facing that in Charlotte as well, is when you have somebody that comes in and sponsors a specific honoree, how do you keep them the next year when the honoree is not being honored again? So I think that's something that we talk about in Charlotte as well. And for us, it's maybe thinking through how can we approach and get them connected long term. So instead of getting to the business through the individual, maybe it's going to the business first and saying, hey, we've got this event. We know you have strong, young professionals. Let's partner together, whether it's an honoree sponsorship, maybe it's, $5,000, and then every year you're going to give us your honoree from your business. So you're guaranteed to have someone highlighted and focused on in the community every year. I know that's one one idea from our local chapter that we're thinking about. But Mac, I know you said you have very strong renewal of your sponsors for your event. So I think when you speak to that, it's about building up their experience and giving them a reason to want to give back. So did you have anything else to add?
I would just add to that the experience is so significant, especially the bid for the cure. We pull $300,000 off the floor every year, and it's so impactful to see all of those cards. We have the electronic bid system now, but we still use the paper cards. And to see all of those bid cards go up over those different levels of bid is pretty impactful. People want to come back, and they want to bring their friends to experience it. So we're moving to a larger venue.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that we've really done is kind of set a tone that our board has to be at the Finest event. I think what we look at our event series for that reason. There's just so much opportunity there long term for us as a chapter, and so it's on the board to be there that night to develop relationships, not just with that year's honoree group, but the folks that are there supporting them, because it really is a unbelievable effect that it can have. And so we've really set an expectation that, one, to show respect to the honorees and the great job they've done and the impact they're having on the chapter that year, but secondly, we need to be there to establish relationships so that we don't have that kind of slingshot effect where they're leaving, right? So, but I think that's really on the board to recognize the importance of that, and particularly with something like the Finest program, you've got to look at the long-term implications of a really solid program.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You know, there are a lot of things that can make an event successful. It doesn't necessarily have to be a high dollar amount. It can be spreading awareness. And if somebody leaves that room and tells somebody else about CF, maybe they become a volunteer, maybe they donate. So, you know, just thinking through all of those different ways, you talk about personal touch points and developing those relationships. I think when we plan these themed events, all of those things should be taken into account. Obviously, at the end of the day, we're here to raise money, but through that process, how can we give people that experience and make them feel that connection to cystic fibrosis?
Yeah, one other thing that we've begun doing is with our Twin Cities Finest program is we have a table of finest at the gala. And that gives them an idea of, oh, this is the next thing. Dang, I want to be involved in this. This is a bigger, better woohoo. And then we acknowledge them and have them stand up. And so that's something for them to shoot for, too, in the Finest program is the top 10 or the top, you know, fundraisers get to go to the gala and get to see this next level. And there's corporate, you know, sponsors and corporate people in those rooms that those young professionals really want to rub elbows with. So use this strategy and this to build that program and retain some of those really good young professionals you want to retain.
We've also seen it work where you actually work with the honoree for this year to have that group, that constituency help select the person next year. Now they have skin in the game. So it's not just a one and done that way.
I think we've got time for one more question. I thought I saw another hand up. Yes, ma'am.
In your Minneapolis gala, when do you do your bid for a cure during the program?
So just to repeat the question, she asked in the Minneapolis gala, or I'm sorry, Minnesota, excuse me. When do you do the bid for a cure? When is the right time?
We have a live auction program that we do, and it's right in the middle. So we take a break, and we talk about the bid, what it is. We have this story that's a tearjerker or a video of some kind, and then we start the bid. So it's right there when everybody's got full tummies, and they've had some fun watching some of these auction items, and probably the puppy has just happened, and so everybody's all, you know, we're taking them on this roller coaster, and it's pretty impactful.
We'll take one more. Mm-hmm.
Just to follow up on that, have you done it the opposite way, where you do a straight bid for a cure and then the auction, and you found that didn't work as well, or you've never done it that?
The question was, have you switched that up and done the bid first and then live auction? Not in my experience. I don't know if we've done that at other events, Kelsey and Joe, but no, it seems to be really effective to just pause on the live auction. And then we kind of have a drop the mic moment of, okay, here we go, we're going to start this, and is there anybody in the room that wants to do $25,000? And everyone's, that's a lot of money. And then we have someone that does, and then once in a while there's a surprise, and there's two.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a few minutes to break out into groups, and I'll talk through what those are going to be. But if you are an existing person in one of these types of events and you want to get some ideas or share some ideas, or if this may be more aspirational for your chapter and you want to get more information from other chapters who are already doing that type of event, we're going to break out into groups, have some discussion. So I'll just call out what those are going to be, and we'll just use the same locations from earlier. For food and wine events, we're going to have Mac and Mac, and we'll be in the back right corner, my right, your left. For finest events or standout recognition type programs for young professionals, we'll be right up here in the front right, and that's with Alan. For Brewers Ball type events, that's going to be Terry, and I think she's up here at the left. Is Terry? Oh, yep, thank you. So in the back left, your right. And then we have golf events, and that's Hillary, and she's going to be up here. So I got those two mixed up, sorry. And then Miss Pam is going to be leading the group with Gala, and she'll kind of be right in the middle. So we're going to break out for a few minutes and talk through that, and then we'll come back together and close. For those that are listening in on our online our online audience, we're actually going to walk around and speak to some of the people that are at the tables and join their conversation. So thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, make sure that you're posting it, and we'll make sure that those get answered as well. So we're going to go drop in on the finest table, since we had a question about that earlier, and we'll share some of that discussion with you.
Not anymore. You don't actually go on the date anymore, but they still do packages. But in both of those instances, it's a great introduction to cystic fibrosis. And so what we look at is more of a
So over at the Finest table, they're talking a little bit about, the strategy behind these different types of events. So using it as a pipeline for how we get qualified young professionals interested in cystic fibrosis and involved in our mission. So the Charlotte chapter actually has 2 events that are focused on young professionals, and one of those is a selection type process, and the other is more of a live auction type event where we just have a good time, get young professionals in, and help spread awareness and also to raise money. So thinking through how you can pair your events together and make sure that we're using these as pipeline feeder events for getting people involved. So one of the questions that came up is around, what do you ask these participants to do? And, I think for the Charlotte chapter specifically, they're talking about breaking down ticket sales as a form of fundraising, asking them to gather live auction items, asking them to gather silent auction items. So I think it can depend on your local chapter and what your goal is. Thinking about fundraising is obviously number one, but how can we help spread awareness and involve the community in these different types of events that we're putting on? One of the things that is coming up in the conversation now is thinking about how to make sure that these young professionals that are coming in can have their own tie to cystic fibrosis. And the way that this group does it is that they break their participants up into different teams, and each of those teams is connected to a family that has a child with cystic fibrosis. So they spend a day with them, they learn about the vests, the medicines that they have to take through the eyes of that child. And it really helps their participants have that personal connection, that person that they're fundraising for, and that person that they feel tied to moving forward. One of the questions that was asked is around having these participants and how you address fundraising minimums. So a lot of chapters, when they participate, will have a fundraising minimum that they commit to raising. And with that, it's just making sure that you're supporting the participants and making sure that they feel empowered to go out and raise that money. A lot of young professionals don't necessarily have experience making that big ask. So if you're going to take that approach, make sure that you are giving them the right support to be able to exceed that goal. One of the other themes that's being discussed is around education. So how do we take these young professionals and empower them to go out in the community and be able to speak to cystic fibrosis? So a lot of the different groups will do crash courses. We have medical personnel that come in and speak. We get them to know a family, and that really helps them be able to go out and articulate what our mission is and why we're fundraising. Another idea that's come up is the idea of having a mission moment. So anytime that you're having a meeting, it's fun. There's lots of, socializing, but always taking that moment to come back to what the original mission is, whether it's having a family come in or somebody speaking about their experience with cystic fibrosis, always having that mission moment, that one moment during the meeting or the event that you pause and go back to that. It's a really neat idea. So now we're going and talking a little bit about challenges. And I think for some of the chapters, it's about engagement and making sure that people continue to still feel connected. For some of the other chapters, it's how can we get our CF patients engaged without obviously putting them at risk by being around other CF patients. So that's some of the things that they're talking about right now. So one of the other ideas that came out in the group conversation is around how you're pairing up the different individuals with their mentors. So trying to keep them away from the person that nominated them as their mentor and really expanding their knowledge and connections through the CF Foundation, trying to mix it up a little bit and make sure that people get to meet each other. So the question that was just asked is, how do you get nominees if you're an early start and you're trying to get this up and running? Where do you go to get your nominees? And I think there's a couple of really good areas. One, it's great to lean on your staff and your board who have those connections out in the community that can go out and identify those young professionals. And two, it's, if you're just starting, using your volunteer base to go out and ask their friends, recognizing your own volunteers who might be making a huge difference and starting it that way. And then once you've already are grown and continuing to grow, we rely very heavily on previous honorees to go back. And once they've had a great experience, then they want to get their friends involved and they want to get the community involved. So right now we're talking a little bit about age and how it plays into the different type of events. And we see that the honoree type programs tend to be a little older. They might have better social circles and professional circles. And an event like a Guys and Dolls is not a selection type event. And that may be more entry level, green, younger type young professionals that want to come in and they want to get to that next step.
We're going to wrap up in about 1 more minute. So I'm hearing lots of great conversation. Want to make sure that you're able to continue that. We're going to wrap up in about 1 more minute. All right. If I could just ask us to give your attention for just 1 moment. If I can ask each of our table leaders to raise your hands. We've got Pam, Alan, Hillary. Raise your hands. All right, we're going to be actually going into a break after this, so I would encourage you to continue the conversations and make sure that you're collaborating around the tables. I'm hearing so many great ideas, so thank you so much for coming to this breakout and for participating. And if anybody has any questions, this group that just raised their hand will hang out for a few minutes after, so don't hesitate to reach out, and we're happy to help. So good luck to all of you in the next year, and thank you for attending.